Louisiana, the state we're in. With Public Affairs Director Beth George.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us on this first edition of Louisiana, the state we're in.
I want you all to know is that we are doing our best to serve the American public.
This week, we'll take you on an alligator hunt in Louisiana's coastal parishes.
As we merge all these technologies, public television's changing.
You ask someone in public broadcasting about Beth Courtney, they know Beth Courtney. They know about everything that she's done. They know about LPB. They know about the fact that we have a great record, and it's because of Beth. She is public broadcasting. She really is. Let me tell you, I had some friends and in 1970, we considered this place to be a sensory deprivation channel when it came to television. We had two stations. There was an NBC station, a CBS station. They kind of cherry-picked ABC programs. And all of us were just like, oh, come on. So at that point, I had my parents put up a big antenna because we were trying to get like stations out of New Orleans where we could get something. It was totally an information desert. Radio was still big back then, and all of us teenagers listened to radio, whether it be top 20, top 40, like that. There was a couple of adult stations where they played that old music, that stuff that some of the old TV engineers that I grew to know back when would say, well, that's the good music there. Yeah, no, that's stuff that you people were listening to. New Orleans was the hub of everything back then. It was where you went for your movies, for your stage shows, for everything creative. It was going to be in New Orleans. Baton Rouge was still kind of that little river town back at that point.
I had my first full-time job as a journalist in radio at WJBO in Baton Rouge. My first day on the job was on January 10th of 1972, and there was a riot on North Boulevard in Baton Rouge, a terrible riot. We had racial problems in the city. Bob Johnson, who was a reporter at WBRZ, was beaten and never recovered. He lived, but he never recovered his faculties after that. It was a terrible event of national proportion. So it began with the riot on January the 10th, and then the news cycle ended in November of 1972 with two students being shot dead on the campus of Southern University by a, to date, unnamed police officer. Politically in Louisiana, it was the first year of Edwin Edwards' governorship. He was the darling of the press. Everyone loved him. He did all kinds of great things and reforms, but everything was about politics. So that's kind of the scene that existed in Baton Rouge, Louisiana at that time.
New Orleans had the first public broadcasting station. Matter of fact, before it was called PBS, it was NET. And WYES, which is a community-developed station, came on the air, I think in the mid-'60s or so like that. There was nothing statewide.
I think public television in other parts of the country, particularly big cities, New York, Los Angeles, were much more advanced than we were in the South and in Louisiana in particular. As I recall, in the early days of public television, you could have three kinds of stations: a city station, a university station, and a state station. And WYES in New Orleans was the first in Louisiana. I became the Commissioner of Higher Education for the state of Louisiana. And then I was very much involved with the establishment of public television. And then the legislature and Governor Edwin Edwards said we need to have a statewide system, and they created LPB.
Yeah, actually, as a reporter, I was very interested in it, and I covered a lot of the meetings that took place in trying to get it established. And so it was kind of interesting and fun to watch it develop, to hear the arguments in the legislature, both pro and con. It's amazing to me to think back that there were enough forward-thinking members of the legislature at that time that saw this as a very important thing to do for the people of Louisiana. And I was actually there as a television reporter to cover the flipping of the switch, ceremonial flipping of the switch and turning it on. But for the general public, I think it was kind of a oh, okay. And I don't think they even really understood what it was going to be.
Just a few weeks ago, the engineers at WLPB were making the final adjustments to the electronic gear, checking levels, refining the quality of the program signal. At the same time, Governor Edwin Edwards, as the chief executive of the state, was leaving the governor's mansion on his way to the studios at WLPB for an important function.
We were so young, and yet we were able to put a station on the air before the end of that year. So in September of 75, pop, first station went on. And for the years that happened, the few years that happened after that, it was nothing but a continual deadline, one after the other, after the other. We've got to get the transmitter out there. We've got to figure out how to do this. We've got to figure out how to do that. We began with the Baton Rouge station, and then moved on from that to Lafayette and Shreveport, Monroe, Alexandria, Lake Charles, all of those stations. New Orleans, of course, had their own station, WYES.
When WLPB went on the air at noon, September 6th, WYES joined it, but just two stations cannot serve an entire state of almost 4 million people. WLPB will serve as the network flagship station with production capability and network control.
Oh, it was an exciting, very exciting time. Television was one of those, it was a high-powered medium. Everybody was still going, God, you're on TV? So we needed a program which dealt with the community, which dealt with what was going on, which dealt with the news that was happening in the state and in Louisiana. As such, there had been a reporter, a radio reporter out there by the name of Beth George. And she had been working at a local commercial station and had done also some commercials before that. And the next thing I knew was, here comes this woman, and this red-headed woman, and she was going to put together a weekly news magazine show. Now, that is something that's very interesting, because we had heard of weekly news magazine shows, but we hadn't really seen anything like that before. And it was going to be tough to do, because let's just say while we had a studio with some cameras, that's about all we had.
Beth and in the beginning, I think a guy named Ron Blom, kind of did everything. And the LPB was in the basement of the state education building back then, dreary. Sometimes it flooded. It was not the best place to be. But they'd be down there working on their editors and late in the night, putting a show together every week, which was kind of unheard of.
She came up with this name. What do you think about this one? Louisiana, the state we're in. And it's like, yes, thumbs up on that one.
Louisiana, the State We're In is a production of WLPB.
What I remember Beth telling me was that, she was kind of out there, and she had been a history teacher at one point and so, but when she became a reporter, she found her soul, so to speak.
Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll hope you'll join us again next week on Louisiana, the State We're In, when we'll have more legislative news, controversial issues, and profiles of interesting people. I'm Beth George. Good evening.
My mother was the oldest of 3 children and only daughter in a military family. Her father, John Spencer Hardy, was from Logansport, Louisiana, and her mother, Virginia Hardy, was from Shreveport. And they lived all over the world, moving every 2 to 3 years, which for my extroverted mother, she loved it, absolutely loved it. They lived in Virginia, Arizona, Colorado. They were living in Hawaii when she was in middle school, and Hawaii became a state.
He was a 3-star general, but he never was a typical general. For instance, I never learned how to shoot a gun because he never owned a gun. He was a fighter pilot and a bomber command in World War II, but he wasn't what you would call a typical military man. He was more a leader and a diplomat. It was very important that a wife of a general, for instance, or a colonel, have an active, engaging, competent, organized wife, and that was my mother to a T.
Her parents lived such an extraordinary life. My mother and her brothers always talk about these unbelievable events. The parents were either hosting or attending that included heads of state and military leaders and movie stars and actual royalty. We have the dress that my grandmother sewed for herself to meet the Queen of England.
I remember when we lived in England, early on I was in high school, so was my brother. There'd be a banquet with all these English uniformed officers, and my mother, being a Southern Baptist like my father, would stand up and say, "Now, Sir Reynolds," or whatever, "would you please say the blessing before we start the meal," which was not something that they did typically in England at all. Certainly not in a. This nonplussed officer, as the story was told to be, stood up and said, "Well, thank God," and that was the end of it. And my mother sat down, which signaled everybody else to sit down, and she just took it as it came. My mother, no matter where she was living at the time, always came back to Shreveport to have all of her children. You can imagine how difficult that would be today, and it was even more so then. But she had it in her mind, and I think my father did too, that we were from Louisiana, even though we're not living there now. So I always say, all of us were born in Louisiana, but we never lived there. Like I say, I never lived here until I started LSU. But we were ingrained as being Louisiana. So I think that's also stuck with Beth, is that Louisiana is important, and it has been important in her life and her career.
I lived in Shreveport, and so what I remember so much about Beth, she was so exotic when she would come to visit Shreveport, because, all of us girls, preteens, just lived in Shreveport, and that was about it. And then Beth would come in and entertain us with her adventures, and specifically I remember, I think we were probably 12 or maybe even 11, and Beth was living in Hawaii, and she taught us all how to do the hula. Now, we just thought that was the most exotic thing ever.
She had a wide worldview, and she, from all this moving and getting to meet people, etc., and she knew that things could be better, it could be bigger, it could be different. We left Honolulu, and she turned up at Biloxi High School, and they said, "Well, you don't need to go to the 10th grade. You need to skip it." So she skipped the 10th grade. So she skipped that grade and went to LSU and was on this and that, the Scotch Guard and the mortar board, and you name it, she was a leader. And so Beth was ready to start an omnibus television program from the beginning, because she knew it was out there to get if you could corral it.
That means you take half and I take half.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I have half.
Yeah.
And you have half.
Yeah, but...
Oh, boy. You have.
Yeah, but...
September 6, 1975, when LPB went on the air, I was 5, and I was absolutely the target demographic for Sesame Street. Kermit the Frog was my favorite character. I spent a lot of time on Sesame Street, and I'm sure I was aware that my mother had something to do with bringing Big Bird into my life, but that was about the extent of that.
The Tiger basketball team now goes on to the SEC tournament.
So in the 1970s and 1980s, very few of my friends had mothers who worked full-time outside of the home. And those who didn't necessarily, I don't know of anyone whose mother literally knew every single person when you turned on the news who was delivering the news and was featured on the news. If she was on a first-name basis with every governor, legislator, or anchor or journalist. No one else had that, and I guess I sort of took that for granted.
There was a glass ceiling, and it was pretty low in Louisiana. And, I could bump my head on it if I wasn't careful. But the things were different.
Well, I'll tell you, looking out there on the legislature, as I did when I had a camera focused on them and such like that, it was really just a bunch of good old boys out there at that point. It was interesting to see were there any women in there. I'm really not sure. I remember at that point it was very unusual to have women in such high authority back then.
She was ridiculed by some, and she was laughed at by some. Some of my colleagues in television joked about, oh, here come these state employees with a camera, and because that's how they were viewed. And actually, when she began coming to the Capitol and covering events and things like that, there were members of the press corps that didn't think she should be credentialed because they felt like, no, she's not a real journalist. You see, her check comes from the state of Louisiana, and therefore she's a state employee and a flack. And so that was her first major hurdle to face within that organization, but she ultimately won everyone over.
She was dogged. She was indefatigable, just as she is now. Single-minded, had an agenda for what she was trying to put together for news.
Successful man,
and
there is a
very
woman.
professional.
Well, tonight on Profile, we take a look at a woman who is an activist, feminist, and lobbyist, and who doesn't take a back seat to anyone.
Our relationship grew as friends and colleagues over about a decade of time. And we got married in 1983. And the World's Fair was coming to Louisiana the next year. And I had been talking with my news director about us doing something crazy. And that was to go to Paris because the French were going to have a big pavilion in Louisiana and a number of different things. And I said, let's go to Paris, let's go to France, and let's do stories about this stuff that's coming. So at some point, we convinced both our bosses that we should do it together and make a big deal out of it. Then I said, well, look, if we're going to Paris, we're going to get married anyway. Why don't we just get married before we go? And it'll be our honeymoon, which was kind of a stupid idea, if you think about it, because on our honeymoon, we had an anchorman, a producer, an interpreter, 2 camera operators, and about 1,000 pounds of television equipment, because we decided we were going to do live satellite feeds from Paris through ABC. And so we took all this gear, and we'd have to produce stories every day.
Louisiana, the French Connection.
The unique relationships between France and Louisiana were given international attention recently when Governor-elect Edwin returned to the country of his origin, accompanied by 600 members of the press, contributors, and friends. It was, on one level, an extravagant fundraiser, bringing in more than $4 million to his campaign coffers. On another level, it was a masterful public relations.
So it wasn't much of a honeymoon, but it was a lot of fun.
Everyone here connected with the show would like to offer our congratulations to our own Beth Courtney. I know you've missed her the past couple of weeks. Well, Beth has been selected Executive Director of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, and I'm proud to tell you that she is the first woman in the country to hold such a position.
Well, there was a vacancy. I can't recall the person who preceded her. It was a long time ago. But yes, I recall writing some letters and making some phone calls. Not that it made a difference. She would have probably got the job anyhow. But I did participate in that effort to convince the board that she was the right person for this job. I thought she'd be perfect, and it turns out she was.
She didn't really see gender in leadership. You just go forward and you give your ideas and you fight for what you believe in. And to her, it was never just about doing television either. It was about the issues and making a difference.
Beth Courtney of PBS.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Beth Courtney. I'm president of Louisiana Public Broadcasting. We operate 6 television stations in Louisiana, and I have some prepared remarks that I'd like to enter into the record, but after listening all day to your committee, I understand the difficult task in front of you, but I'd like to share with you my impressions of what public television is and what it does in my state. 1/3 of our children live in poverty, and our service is their only opportunity to receive these wonderful programs to make a difference in their lives. I appreciate your consideration, and I would welcome any questions from you at a later time.
I think that LPB is probably a station that people in government thought was a throwaway, right? Like, we can just dump some educational stuff there and nobody will pay attention. And Beth was able to bring in the community to make it a central part of, I think, Louisiana culture.
Back in Louisiana, she shared her frustration over the congressional hearing with her senior staff.
Really troubled me, all the misinformation, as they don't even know what we do. We need to spend some more time, frankly, talking about what we're already doing.
The way that she was able to bring in partners and make sure that every voice in Louisiana is heard, every corner of Louisiana is covered, allows it to have so much more influence and power than I think was initially thought of back in the 70s and continues today.
We're delighted to be coming to you from the city of Monroe in Ouachita Parish.
Such a value. I mean, I think it's important for us to know our stories. And I think about so many times, whether it's the civil rights issues in Louisiana, the power of Baptist churches, Clementine Hunter celebrated Louisiana musicians. LPB has never been shy about shining a light on issues that matter and has never really sugarcoated the story. They've told a very factual story about what has happened in our state, the individuals who've made an impact, who have sacrificed, who have tried to move our state forward. And again, it gives us an opportunity to say, this is who we are and who would we like to be.
LPB came around about the same time as the Civil Rights Movement. And LPB has always been at the front of promoting civil rights and particularly supportive of programming that encouraged the African American community of Louisiana.
Welcome everyone, I'm Robin Merrick, friend of LPB, here live from the LPB studios for Beth Courtney, Fearless Visionary. We have our special guest joining us today. We've got Commissioner Jay Darden, who serves as Commissioner of Administration for the state of Louisiana. Jay, we're glad to have you here. Also, Louisiana's famed chef, John Fost, is joining us. And LPB's all-around guy, Clay Fourier, in studio. Yeah, Clay is back with us this evening, and we're excited to have you here to talk all things LPB and all things Beth Courtney, our fearless visionary. And this is an awesome program that we've had a chance to watch. We're watching right now, and so we're excited about that, right?
We're all excited about it. We love LPB. Beth has been a leader for such a long time.
Indeed.
And a lot of what LPB is Beth.
That's right. The two are very much synonymous. I can't imagine saying LPB without thinking about Beth Courtney and all the work that she's done. And I want to start there talking about her leadership and LPB in its 46th year. Beth has been a trailblazer in this arena. There's no question about that. And I want to start just on some of our thoughts and fond memories of Beth and her leadership. And Jay, I'm going to start with you as our Commissioner of Administration.
LPB could be Louisiana Pioneer Beth instead of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
I love it.
She's been she is synonymous with LPB. As long as I've been involved in government, Beth has been an articulate advocate for television, public television, but really more importantly, education. She always focused on the educational component of what LPB had to offer. And from my days in the legislature all the way to my days now, dealing with budgets and listening to Beth's appeal, they were always reasonable, they were always appropriate, and she knew exactly how to talk to legislators and talk to people who could make decisions that would help her do her job better.
That's right, and she was very thorough at that. She left no stone unturned. She covered all the grounds when it came to the Louisiana legislature, and I've had an opportunity to witness her do just that. So that's amazing. So Chef John, your thoughts?
Well, you know, I remember the day I got the call from Beth Courtney. Justin Wilson was moving on from LPB back to, I think, Mississippi Broadcasting at the time. And I got a call from a name I didn't know, Beth Courtney, who was saying, you know, I think you may be able to fill an opportunity at Louisiana Public Broadcasting for us. We really need a Cajun and Creole voice. And I think I had a Cajun and Creole voice. I didn't have any talent, but I had the Cajun and Creole voice. But Beth sought me out, and of course I had never been on camera in my life. And she said, you know, we think it'd be great for you to do a little special on us on something on Louisiana. And she helped me with my first television program, and that was our Taste of Louisiana, which was our first Thanksgiving in Louisiana, and it was my first time on TV, and she kind of walked me through it, and Clay and all of everybody who was working so hard to kind of get that program up and on air. And then from that, she offered me an opportunity to do a series, and of course our Lieutenant Governor came in and supported us for every one of my shows throughout my 12 years on public broadcasting. So I have two great friends between our Lieutenant Governor and Beth Courtney. So she was just great inspiration to me.
Right, you know, she had a vision then, even to see that you could take this to a whole nother level, and you've become totally a household name in Louisiana.
Well, you know, she saw the importance of bringing Cajun and Creole to the national market. I mean, we were just this little bitty segment of society here, and even though we were important in our Cajun and Creole cooking and all the things we were doing, she saw it as an opportunity to bring the uniqueness of Louisiana's music, Louisiana's food, the culture to the world. And she did an unbelievable job in trusting that some of us who had no experience in television could help do that. And she inspired us to be good at what we did. She taught us to be ready for television.
That's right.
And
ready
so I wouldn't
for the
be here
world.
without her.
Literally ready for the world. And Clay, you know, Chef John talks about things that are unique. You have a truly unique story because you've been with Beth since the beginning. When I think back, and I say the beginning because you all started as young reporters and you moved on at LPB doing every job, it seems, here at LPB. So you've got to have some great stories and
You think I
memories.
get a steady job out of this? Just one thing.
You know,
after
we
the
won't
other.
let you go. That's what it is.
Well, I think that it was very interesting that we began this network as some little upstart station out of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. You know, and it was a group of young people putting this together, and the idea that they were going to put on an educational and culture of Louisiana station was just something unheard of. That time period, it was just nothing but commercial television. There was no streaming, there was no internet, there was nothing like that. And yet we had that mission to educate the populace of Louisiana and to present the culture, the history, the politics of Louisiana, and to not only show it to people of Louisiana, but to the rest of the country too. And the country, so to speak, they thought Louisiana was one thing. You know, some people still thought it was like riverboats and such like that.
Just riverboats.
Just riverboats, yeah. And we wanted to show the rest of the world what it was really about down here. We have such a unique culture. The art, the history, all of this is available now through Louisiana Public Broadcasting. Did not exist before LPB.
That's right. And that's the beauty of all of this. It didn't exist. I can't imagine now, 46 years later, life without LPB. Having grown up with LPB in Louisiana, can any of you really imagine what it would be like if we didn't have this huge, awesome resource to tell the Louisiana stories? So
absolutely not. And you know what we've got coming up here is we've got something to honor Beth.
We do.
With the production, the Production Legacy Fund. And there's something I want to go through here right now about that. So
yes, definitely.
Here it is. For a contribution of $120 or just $10 a month, you're going to receive a Roku Express, there it is right there, to watch your favorite LPB and PBS programs whenever you want, wherever you want. Now consider taking a leadership role with others statewide and becoming a major donor. Now you can join the Directors Guild for a contribution of $500 or more. You can become a Visionary Society member with a contribution of $1,200. And by the way, that breaks down to just a little bit more than $3 a day. What a bargain. In fact, you can become a Visionary Society member through our sustaining membership program for $100 a month. Or, for those who are able, consider leading the way with a contribution of $10,000 or more and become the Louisiana Legends Society member. Your investment will help sustain LPB as a public media resource available to all Louisiana citizens. Now, when you contribute at any level, you provide a foundation of support for new and established productions that continue to tell, as I was mentioning, Louisiana's unique stories. A Takapa, a Chaffalaya houseboat, Against the Tide, Deeply Rooted. All those programs, you see them right there. That's just a few examples of the body of work that you are contributing to when you make that pledge of support right now. So call us at 888-769-5000. You can text GIVE to that number. You can also go online to lpb.org, make a secure pledge, or you can use that QR code you see right there on your screen right now. Put your phone up to that and contribute to this Production Legacy Fund here in honor of Beth.
Yes, we're excited about that, and this is a new function for us, new opportunity to give and support public television here in Louisiana. And we also need to thank Roy O. Martin and his company for the corporate challenge that is going on right now during this break. Roy O. Martin is matching all donors that give tonight dollar for dollar up to the first $1,500 called in during these breaks. In effect, this will make your donation worth twice as much to LPB. So we want to hear from you. The number to call is right there, 888-769-5000. Or of course you can text GIVE to 888-769-5000, that same number, or go online to lpb.org and the QR code is on your screen. Yes, we've got 4 ways to give, and we want to hear from you and know that you want to support programming here in Louisiana. So we were talking more about the program that we're watching right now, and we've just got a few more minutes before we go back to the program. But I want to talk a little bit more about how LPB is truly a service to Louisiana citizens. And Commissioner, you can speak to that like no one else, I think, because of the work that you do for the state of Louisiana?
Well, there's no question that just the shows that Clay just mentioned, and there's so many more that tell the story of Louisiana, whether it's the food or the culture, the history that's so rich. LPB has told that story, and Beth has been behind every one of those programs. She's been the face of LPB. We've all seen her on camera doing what we're doing right now, asking people to send money, but she's behind the scenes been the person who's made everything click from a business standpoint, as well as from a national role that she's had. I mean, she represented Louisiana at a national level with public broadcasting, and she's going to be like following Bear Bryant. When somebody else comes in, I mean, she has been the leader and the pioneer and the person who's made it all happen, and she's getting her just due right now with this program that's such a testimony to the great work she's done over the years.
It really is.
Well, I can say also I'm really proud of the work that she and certainly all of you have done here as well. When I think traveling the world and being recognized out there because of Louisiana Public Broadcasting, bringing all of the shows we've done over the years, showcasing the culture, the cuisine, the cities, the towns, the rivers, the cooking techniques that were all created here in this studio to share with the world. I cannot get off of a plane or walk into a building anywhere that people don't instantly recognize me from Louisiana Public Broadcasting. All the other work we've done, I've opened restaurants all over the world, but it's LPB that created John Foss.
We love it. And Chef, we're going to go back to Beth Courtney, Fearless Visionary, and we're going to talk more in the next break. See you back in a minute.
Bonjour mesdames, messieurs, et encore un très bienvenue à En Français, une émission pour les francophones de la Louisiane.
I was on En Français several times, as I recall. This was a Sunday afternoon French language program with starring State Senator James Fontenot from Abbeville. French was so beautiful, very, very fluent.
Commission sur le français comme seconde langue dans l'État de la Louisiane.
Basically, it was to let our French viewers across the state know that we were still around, the French language was thriving, and LPB was supporting that. I know my folks never missed it. And I'm sure you could multiply that 1,000 times across the state, particularly in South Louisiana.
Beth Courtney, as a member of the board of directors, are you contending that public broadcasting isn't good enough to survive without a taxpayer handout?
I'm saying that we have room in this country for at least one station where the bottom line isn't making a buck, where the bottom line is quality television and educational television.
We have a lot of those on cable TV.
She became the face of LPB, and she brought the state together because I don't think anyone had the vision that I knew of that really wanted to see it become something like that. But she always thought it was going to be something much, much more than people thought it would be, and I think she accomplished that.
Good evening. Tonight we have a unique opportunity to listen to and learn something about all of the candidates who are running for the office of governor of the state of Louisiana.
The interesting thing about debates is that no one had ever really had a statewide debate.
Elections are very big in Louisiana, and politics has always had a big place in Louisiana. It's kind of like a spectator sport, as a matter of fact, the way it's always been working. And LPB, through Beth, became a place where you would learn more about those people, because with the gubernatorial debates, we became a public broadcasting network that would actually strive to do debates and send them out around the state. This is something that had not been done before. Commercial channels had done a little bit of this, and you'd heard about debates in the distance, but it just became the regular thing for LPB.
Now from the LPB Telecommunications Center.
So quite often, Beth and I were competing with one another about who was going to do the debate, who was going to get the candidates first, who was going to get the best date. So she was competing with commercial television as well, because it was a big plum to be able to do that. And she generally always won.
This is Decision 2003, the race for governor.
Good evening, I'm Beth Courtney. Welcome to Louisiana's historic Old State Capitol in Baton Rouge, and the first of 3 gubernatorial debates presented by Louisiana Public Broadcasting and the Council for a Better Louisiana.
The Blanco debate, you would watch Beth always in her element, never nervous, never seemed to be, taken aback by a response, just steady, thoughtful, focused on trying to get the answers that Louisiana citizens needed to have. And I've always admired that about her, just her sunny smile, just her demeanor, but really her intelligence and her comfort as a reporter.
The biggest debate that we ever did, the most infamous one, was the Edwin Edwards-David Duke debate.
Former Governor Edwin Edwards is running for a record 4th term against State Representative David Duke. Live from Baton Rouge, Louisiana Public Broadcasting presents Debate 91, the governor's race.
We had national reporters here and photographers. We had international photographers and reporters here. They were all gathered around for this thing. Edwards was there. He was waiting. It was going to be a live debate. Duke was nowhere around. And this is before the cell phones where you could figure out where the heck they were and such like that. I think about 5 minutes before we were going on the air, because we always said, well, I guess we'll talk to Edwin about something. Suddenly this car just comes right up, just races to the front door, and here comes Duke, and he tears on out of there. The car is smoking. They have basically burned up the engine trying to get here in time. And he ran into the studios, and he was there. And it was a very interesting debate.
To begin this evening's debate, we will have opening statements from both the candidates.
Beth was instrumental in all of these debates. She was the one who would make sure that all the people were there. She also had the foresight of connecting up with the Council for a Better Louisiana to help develop a debate program, which would be something that we could use on a continual basis throughout the many years that we've done these debates.
As Mr. Treen says, it's constitutionally mandated, so it has to be a balanced budget.
But we've not
Mr.
always
Henry,
had the balance.
you claim credit for a lot of legislative reforms, but don't you also have to accept the responsibility? They spent a lot of that surplus, didn't they, this
They
session?
certainly did.
Well, I think all the governors have respected her voice. She is a staunch advocate, as you know, for public broadcast, and she's never been shy, no shrinking violet, about talking about the importance of the investment and the return on the investment for LPB.
Now, Governor Romer, you certainly had difficulty with the legislature yourself.
I'm just listening.
Certainly for me, as someone who's worked in governor's offices, I can remember at the dawn of any administration, seeing her broadcasting early that morning, talking about the new administration.
I'm Beth George.
And I'm Ron Blanc.
We have a brief lull in the ceremonies because Governor-elect Dave Treen has promised that he will be inaugurated promptly at 12:03 so that people all over the state can see him on statewide television.
You have this opportunity to see that particular leader conversing, of course, with Beth Courtney about what mattered to them, what they tried to do, what their legacy is, and what is left to be done in Louisiana.
On October 13th, 1990, Friends of LPB held a Louisiana Legends Banquet, honoring 6 Louisiana legends that were featured in the original series hosted by Gus Weil.
The Legends Gala was created in 1990 to honor the best and the brightest of Louisiana. So often Louisiana's not at the top of every list, and we wanted to make sure that we recognize these individuals for their outstanding achievements. The individuals were either born or raised, educated, or reached the pinnacle of their career in Louisiana. We have honored 149 honorees, including the current ambassador to the United Nations, Star athletes Terry Bradshaw, Archie Manning, Lou Brock, Ron Guidry, world-renowned surgeons, Dr. Michael DeBakey, and Dr. Terry King. In fact, Dr. Terry King is writing his autobiography, and he told me when he's looking back at his career achievements, the Legends Gala and the recognition ranks right up there with being nominated for a Nobel Prize. Speaks volumes.
You know, honestly, tonight has been such a special evening for all of us. I know you...
When Beth took over as the executive director and president and CEO for LPB, it couldn't have been more fortunate for our little network, because basically budgets were becoming very, very tight at that point. And by her being the spokesperson for LPB, we were able to survive a very, very lean time. I remember when we would actually get the signs and get the neighborhoods and go to the Capitol and have them up there about saving Big Bird. So Beth, being the person that she is, was able to, in my mind, basically save LPB.
Hello and welcome to the LPB studios. I'm Beth Courtney, president of LPB, and you are watching The Spirit of a Culture, Cane River Creoles.
I was very enthused by the number of people that started actually not only contributing to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, but also wanting to volunteer at Louisiana Public Broadcasting, especially during our pledge drives. And pledge drives were something brand new. You know, nobody had seen anything like that before. We got people in who were community activists, who were artists, people who knew something about public broadcasting or wanted to know more and wanted to help develop the culture of this state, because they knew that with LPB, you would also be able to create a living legacy with regards to the video history of this state, things that were being lost, films that were rotting in some type of archive. We would be creating history because we would be recording history.
I mean, I can remember getting the email from LPB saying, you know, we're doing a Clementine Hunter show, or we're doing a show with Irma Thomas, or there's some, you know, great cultural or art event that's going to be part of our pledge drive. Will you come and be volunteer talent? I always said yes. My calendar allowed. If I couldn't, I'd try to move my meeting so that I could be here. Beth would be here with her big smile to greet me and the staff.
Is Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid. You worked hard for that. I'm going to give it to you. A higher education.
We depend upon our volunteers. They come in, they're phone operators, volunteer camera operators. In fact, one of our volunteers transcribes our digital archives. You know, we couldn't do it without them. And if you ask a volunteer, why do you want to help? Why do you support LPB? They'll tell you, I want to make an impact. I want to make a difference in my community. And not many organizations give you the ability to make an impact locally, but on a statewide level and beyond. And LPB does that.
This live television is just wonderful. You know, we're having the best time, but we need you to be part of all this. Give us a call, 1-888-769-5000. Across the state of Louisiana, we're waiting on you.
Beth doesn't really respond to the honor of doing something. She responds to the challenge of doing it. So I don't think she ever looked at it like an honor. Nor did she even view it as like, I'm the first woman. That really wasn't important to her. It was just the job.
And what we've tried to do is be involved in all this technology planning so that we can then help give some suggestions. And we're also plugged into a lot of our colleagues, what colleagues are doing in other states, so that we can come back in and share that information or do a teleconference via satellite that says, let's talk about the E-rate. What are they doing in North Carolina? So I spent a lot of time trying to find information like that out that I can bring back to Louisiana too. And it's actually, we're, as you say, Carl, I think we're on just on the edge of doing some really wonderfully innovative things.
I joined the LPB in 1997 after working in commercial TV at WVLA here in town. And I remember running into Beth one day in the hallway, and she asked me, was I going to bring over all my innovative technology from commercial TV to PBS, and I told her that was my exact intent, to move PBS forward. Back in the day, PBS actually was about to transition to satellite, And Beth and a couple of the engineers that were here saw the wherewithal to look at this as a method of delivering our signal via satellite statewide. And it was also cost effective. So she moved LPB, a statewide network, to satellite. And today, LPB is one of the only few statewide networks that still remains on satellite. And we have our own transponder, so we can go live at any time and it will cover statewide, one to many. That was under Beth's leadership.
Welcome to the power of algebra. Sherlock Holmes just used algebra to figure that Moriarty's bomb would go off 5 minutes too early.
Education has always been a #1 priority with Beth. She truly believes in the power of public media to educate, especially our young children. And she's always had that vision. And that's what drives this education department, is to provide quality resources to our families, our caregivers, our teachers, and our students across Louisiana. I can't exactly remember the details, but it offered free internet to teachers. And we did classes here at LPB, and we had a laboratory, and we taught teachers how to access their free internet and how to use it. And into that, we opened it up to the general public. We trained all kind of people on how to use Word, PowerPoint, the internet, how to use Palm Pilot, handheld Palm Pilots. And a lot of the people who came here were older people who were trying to get on the technology bandwagon. So not only do we service kids, we serve families, we serve caregivers, we serve teachers, and we serve all children here in the state of Louisiana.
And tonight we're doing something we've never done before. We're putting our membership drive on hold to focus our attention completely on education.
She was telling the tale that right before her confirmation hearing for her presidential appointment, Senator John McCain was trying to make her feel more relaxed by teasing with her a little bit and almost playing like a little prank on her. And that was probably not the best move. But in 2003, she got through her confirmation hearing. She served on the CPB board. There's absolutely nothing that she can't do. But the fact that Mom had a presidential appointment to this extraordinarily important board really was just completely on brand for her.
She became very well known in Washington, D.C. circles, something that was very unheard of at that time. And she actually excelled in this. And from that, we as LPB excelled. She testified before Congress. She was on news programs about public broadcasting and how, of course, it was being cut. She was out there talking about it 24/7.
Where the bottom line is quality television and educational television.
We have a lot of those.
Well, you know, Beth did really become a spokesperson for public television in general, especially in Washington. I think that the PBS board and the other organizations very quickly realized that she had something that nobody else had. She had that southern charm and that great ability and that smile and those dimples, and she could look so nice and sweet, and underneath it there's a steel magnolia. She loves to debate, she loves to argue, she loves to make her points, and she usually makes them very well. So there's no fear there.
I've never seen her afraid of anything. I think completely fearless and just so confident in knowing that she can do whatever she wants to do and to accomplish whatever she needs to accomplish.
In this whole world of technology, using all these powerful mediums that are coming together for education purposes.
And as a result of her service on the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, she was able to bring a lot to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, particularly in terms of dollars. And we'll never be able to count the millions that have come to Louisiana as a result of Beth's positions and her influence.
Catastrophic, total devastation.
Their area was one of the hardest hit by Hurricane Katrina.
New Orleans is nearly isolated and trying not to break down.
Here we go.
Welcome back to our Channel 4 viewers and those on LPB across
Hurricane Katrina, I distinctly remember being on staff that day and the front doorbell rang, and I went up front and it was a group of guys from WWL standing at the door, and they said Beth Courtney said that we could come to LPB. From there, we let them in. They took up home here because after all, New Orleans was right in the site of Katrina. They stayed from August until November here in our studio operating for WWL because most of the folks in New Orleans were displaced. But the main thing that I can remember Beth for out of that is she petitioned the FCC to allow WWL to go on air on one of our service channels. That was unheard of. And we broadcast WWL, a commercial station, along with LPB, a public station, statewide at the same time, right out of our studios here. And that was a feat.
Good evening and welcome to Louisiana's Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney.
And I'm Charles Zewe.
We'd like to welcome you tonight to this program that marks the first in a year-long series of programs designed to stimulate discussion of vital issues confronting Louisiana.
I think about Public Square, where you bring people in, expert panels. I have been on a panel. I have certainly watched many panels and conversations and topics that really matter.
Public Square. Public Square is classic Beth Courtney educator.
Louisiana's workers are considered to be among the most productive in the nation.
You read about something going on in the world, or she does. Beth, other people just read a newspaper article. Mom reads a newspaper article about an issue that is going on in the world, and she's curious. She wants to find out the data on it. Let's do our research. Let's find out the baseline facts. Now let's gather up the experts. Let's gather up people with strong opinions. Let's gather up people with no opinions. And let's get everybody educated on an issue and try to figure out a path forward.
Well, Barry, the audience is engaging still with a lot of very interesting questions. We were talking about...
and so that's been the value of LPB, not just quality programming, which is very important, but this idea of saying to us as Louisiana citizens, this is your state, you should care, you should be engaged, and these are the issues that matter.
I think I took Beth's influence for granted when I was in Louisiana. And I think moving to Oklahoma showed me, one, how important she was for LPB, and two, how other public television stations around the country don't have anybody like Beth. She is, I think, one of the greatest exporters of Louisiana culture in the world. You know, we hear Louisiana music, we see Louisiana food, because Beth knew that that was important and wanted to make sure that she shared that with the world.
And let me see how Murphy Brown recipe for la sauce patate come out. Just bon, just right, I guarantee.
Beth will often say that LPB was the original Food Network. You know, we have featured great chefs, Justin Wilson, John Foss, Leah Chase, Miss Lucy.
You know how that's how Cajuns cook. They just throw everything in the pot.
You know, you can't talk about Louisiana without talking about our great food.
Hello and welcome to A Taste of Louisiana. I'm Chef John Foss, and today we're cooking Cajun and Creole.
My first time on television was doing a 3-minute cooking segment on a local television show, and that was unheard of in Baton Rouge. Nobody was doing cooking on television. But all of a sudden there was kind of a growing interest in Cajun and Creole. So it was in 1989 that Beth actually came and knocked on the door and said, you know, we really want to do a holiday special on the first Thanksgiving in Louisiana. And would you be willing to do that for us? And you can write it, you can do whatever you want, and we'll put the team together. And that's exactly the way it happened. Well, my first series was called A Taste of Louisiana with Chef John Foss.
Ah, Louisiana. Hi, I'm Chef John Foss, welcoming you to the bayous of South Louisiana. Today, Cajun and Creole cooking holds a prime spot in the world of international cuisine, and I would love for you to know a little bit about it.
I think we've done probably over 400 half-hour shows. I'm sure that's a good number. And when I think of 400 shows and I think of the crew that had to shoot it, the friendships we made along the way, the talent that made that show work, the instructors who worked so much with me every day to say, let's do this and let's do that, and what about if we did this? It was all through Beth's genius. It was all through Louisiana Public Broadcasting. Well, there's no doubt about it that what LPB did for me was make me a cooking star on television.
So this is going to go into a 350-degree oven, and it's going to cook for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending on how cheap your round steak was. You know what I'm talking about?
Everybody sitting watching A Taste of Louisiana had a different opportunity to say, I'm going to Louisiana. And it was through the show and the diversity of programming that we did. Every season was different. Every place was different in the state. So it was a marriage made in heaven, no doubt about that.
I like the way you get excited about that.
It is the greatest gift I've ever received, and that is Louisiana Public Broadcasting coming to me and with the realization that I could go national with not only my shows, but also bringing Louisiana cooking and culture to the world, not only to the U.S.
All right, y'all, I'm pouring each one of you a barracuda here, and this, be careful, this thing will come back and bite. Joe?
Welcome back. I'm Robin Merrick, and we're here in the LPB studios with our very special guest, Commissioner Jay Darden. We've got Chef John Fosse with us and Clay Fourier as we watch Beth Courtney, Fearless Visionary, amazing program that we're viewing. And we are excited to continue to talk about the legacy that LPB has and the legacy that Beth Courtney has brought to all of us here in Louisiana. And I want to start just first off, the service that LPB brings to Louisiana, the great service that it is to our people, and we understand that it is truly that for Louisiana.
It really is, and the great shows over the years that LPB has produced and made available to the people of Louisiana has been such an educational tool for people to understand better the unique nature of Louisiana. And I can think in terms of Beth going to the legislature and talking about things that LPB does and did behind the scenes, not the kind of things you see necessarily on TV every night, but the digital archive of Louisiana history that Beth was so involved in creating, and the creation of the network that is LPB all around the state. It's not just a single facility here in Baton Rouge. It's every nook and cranny of Louisiana has access to LPB and the educational opportunities that it presents.
And Chef, you know, we took Cajun cooking all over the state and the world. But not only that, it was a service to the citizens because we counted on you to figure out our recipes, how we were going to make dinner, how we were going to make the special occasion meals and that type of thing.
Well, I think she took a big chance on all of us because I had never done anything on television up to that point, and she came to me and said she thought it'd be a good idea to have me on camera to bring the story of Louisiana. And you know, I put my trust in her because I had no experience on television whatsoever, but she was a great mentor. She was a great friend. She was fantastic at getting my vision for the stories I needed to tell about Louisiana. And then one day she said, you know what, just tell your story.
Yeah.
She said, your story is really unique in Louisiana. You're growing up in the swamplands, being taught to cook by an African-American mother who came into your home when my mom died and embraced her. She said, you have a really rich story about what Louisiana's really all about. And she says, just tell your story. It's going to be great. And I can't thank you enough because as Lieutenant Governor, you really backed us on every one of our, you never said no. And I want to thank you so much for what you did because you really alone made us all who we are as well by supporting us in our efforts. So I thank you for that. Right. But Beth was a great friend and taught me really about media and how to tell the story that Louisianians would embrace, and then ultimately the world as we took our Taste of Louisiana globally, right? So
it is.
I can never thank her enough.
I got it for sure. And Clay, you know, being a citizen of Louisiana and this being a service to Louisianians, I want to go back to the educational roots of LPB. This is Louisiana educational television. That's where the roots of everything started.
Correct.
Talk a bit about that service to Louisiana.
Well, of course, the agency is Louisiana Educational Television Authority, and LPB is one of the services associated with that one. We looked at, when we started this network, we looked at it as a technology, a new technology at that time, to educate not just someone in one school, but the entire state. And it took a few years to get all the transmitters up and running, but that young group of people that were there, they were able to do that. And then we would be able to connect with the schools. And we're very proud of our educational service.
Indeed.
Our educational services department. We helped by creating the ITV programs that were shown in the schools for many years. And then the technology of VCRs came in so they could record those and show them at other times. And now we have so much that's available to students and to teachers through the internet. It's one of our main missions, that educational quality.
Exactly. I wanted to cover that point, that is one of the main missions of LPB and the service to the citizens here in Louisiana. Now we've got some great gifts as well. Clay, I'm turning right back over to you.
I'm going to tell you that besides that education, we do a lot of great programs on the culture, the music, the food, the politics of Louisiana, but we can't do it without the support of the folks out there. So of course, we're coming to you at this time to help us. So in honor of Beth, and to help create a legacy for LPB Productions, we've got some great thank you gifts, as we tend to call them. So please call right now at 888-769-5000. Go online to lpb.org, make that pledge of support. Use that QR code. Here's some of the gifts. First and foremost right here, for a contribution of $120 or just $10 a month, you'll receive the Roku Express to watch your favorite LPB PBS programs whenever you want, wherever you want. And of course, that's also going to be on Passport, so we offer that too. Consider taking a leadership role with other statewide people and become a major donor. For the Directors Guild, you can contribute $500 or more. There it is, you're a member of the Directors Guild. Become a Visionary Society member with a contribution of $1,200. Now, folks, that just breaks down to a little more than $3 a day. In fact, you can become a Visionary Society member through our sustaining membership program at $100 a month. Or for those who are able, consider leading the way with a contribution of $10,000 or more and becoming a Louisiana Legends Society member. Now, your investment will help sustain LPB as a public media resource available to all Louisiana citizens. And when you contribute at any level, you provide a foundation of support for new and established productions that continue to tell Louisiana's unique story. So whether it be a Takapa, a Chafalaya houseboat, Against the Tide, Deeply Rooted, you know what, these are just a few of the examples of the body of the work that you will be contributing to. So call us right now at 888-769-5000. We would love to produce more Louisiana-specific programs, but you know what, folks, we can't do it without that pledge of support. There's the number on your screen. You can go to lpb.org, make your pledge of support. You can text GIVE to 888-769-5000 or scan that QR code. And we have a challenge, don't we, Robin?
That's right, Clay. We do have a challenge, so you can give your support to LPB right now by giving us a call. And what's going to happen is Roy O. Martin is going to match dollar for dollar your contribution up to $1,500. So we want to thank Roy O. Martin and the company out there in Central Louisiana for the work that they're doing to support public broadcasting here in Louisiana. But your gift can be worth twice as much by giving us that call of support during this break. And you want to be able to do that to encourage public broadcasting in your state and keep the lines going for us. Hey, we're going to take a break right now and go back to the program. Beth Courtney, Fearless Visionary.
Say, is your coffee table crying for colorful magazines? Do you search frantically through the newspaper for the public television listings, getting newsprint all over your hands and generally making yourself crazed? The answer for you is Visions. Visions is the monthly program guide published by the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting. Inside, you will discover interesting articles, in-depth reports on special programs, and thorough program listings. If you would like to receive this helpful and informative magazine, call the Friends of Louisiana Public Broadcasting at 504-925-9624. You owe it to yourself and your coffee table.
The following program is a production of Louisiana Public Broadcasting.
Before the start of the Civil War, Louisiana was a place of enchanting beauty, robust prosperity, and abundant promise.
Beth wanted that series on the history of Louisiana. It took quite a while to get that. to be able to find the funding for that, to be able to bring all that in, to be able to get the correct people in, you know, writers and directors and graphic artists and the many talents that were involved to do this series.
On January 9th, 1861, a band of Louisianians armed themselves and boarded the steamboat National in New Orleans, then headed north to Baton Rouge.
And I think that series right there, that Louisiana A History, if nothing else, that right there is a triumph for Beth and for LPB.
Do you go to bed at night worrying about the economy, the crime rate, natural disasters, and job security? Do you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders? They say laughter is the best medicine, and LPB has just what the doctor ordered. Relax and enjoy the unique British humor of Sweet 16, Good Neighbors, The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, Dad's Army, and Bless Me Father. Weeknights at 10 on LPB, of course. Let LPB tuck you in bed with a smile on your face.
I think the numerous awards that we've won over the decades, the national programming that we produced out of Louisiana is basically because of that need that Beth has always had to make everything as good as possible, to make it be as precise and as perfect as possible. That's why we've got those awards. That's why those programs have been distributed nationally.
Victory or defeat in Normandy would be determined by the valor of men like those whose mission it was to seize and secure Lafayette.
LPB is the tapestry of Louisiana. It's a value for our state, and it calls on us to be better than we are every single day, because it allows us to really understand what is happening in our state and where we need to lean in to make a difference. And so that's a special person that we have the opportunity to celebrate, as she has a well-deserved retirement. I can't even imagine LPB without Beth Courtney. They are one and the same, but it's so great to have an opportunity to take a moment to say thank you and to reflect on her amazing contributions at the state and national level and the work that she has done to demonstrate what women can do in our great state.
I think one important thing about Beth is that she can be a really good friend. As she is a business person, she's certainly passionate about public television, but she's also passionate about her friends, passionate about her family, and passionate about her community.
She absolutely lives her values in her priorities: family, work, community, faith. They all come out in the way that she allocates her time, her efforts, her energy, and her love. Those things will never be sacrificed.
Well, I don't think LPB would exist without Beth Courtney. The work that she was doing to showcase Louisiana to the world, when so many people thought of Louisiana just as a little hick town of Cajun and Creole French-speaking folks, and maybe folks fighting in the governor's mansion or something. We were colorful. Beth brought all of that into a new space, a space of professionalism, honesty, relationships, and all she really cared about was to tell the real story of Louisiana and to do it on the medium that she loved so much, and that was public television.
You ask someone in public broadcasting about Beth Courtney, they know Beth Courtney. They know about everything that she's done. They know about LPB. They know about the fact that we have a great record, and it's because of Beth. Beth has been out there. She has helped CPB. She has helped other public broadcasting networks. She has worked with so many of the other executive directors out there to create what we consider to be one of the best government systems out there. She is public broadcasting. She really is.
You know, there is no way that LPB would be the same without Beth's leadership. Beth has developed a top 10 program in a state that usually finishes in the bottom 10. And so we have 40, 50, 45 examples of good stations that LPB could be like if they didn't have Beth's leadership. But instead, we have, a jewel in the network for public television and for the state because of Beth's vision and her leadership.
She
absolutely loved going to work every day. That's why she rarely missed work. But I think that she loves it like a child. And I think that I'm getting a little choked up. She loves it like a child. In many ways, it was like her own creation. And I don't mean that in an egotistical way, but she didn't even want to retire now. I mean, she knew she had to. She knew that it was best for her to do so, but she would stay as long as she could because she loved it so much.
In this little state, with not a whole lot of money, able to do what this network now has been able to do. And I'm very proud of her for that, very proud.
I think the entertainment programming is second to none on LPB, and Beth Courtney kind of one and the same to most people in Louisiana. You know, Beth is synonymous with LPB. Often the case that Donna and I, when we watch TV, which isn't that often, but that we're watching public broadcasting, and we're fans of things that you all do there, and it's just been very, very important to our state. And again, I wish Courtney nothing but the best in her retirement.
She never gives up. She always wins. And that's probably the most amazing thing about her. She has not only helped create great programs, but she's also brought together incredibly talented people and created a team of people that will continue that legacy on.
LPB was never just a job for my mother. It was a calling. It was service for a greater and higher purpose. LPB, as it is today, is everything that she believes in. Education, culture, music, excellence, and being nimble and relevant in a changing world, and mentoring and supporting others. It's celebrating the best of Louisiana, as well as preserving and learning from its shortcomings. The station, its staff, its programs, its mission and its impact, its friends and foundation all embody and reflect the work, the love, the strength, the genius, and the unwavering commitment of Beth Courtney.
Thank you for joining us tonight, and we hope you'll join us again next week on Louisiana, the State We're In, when we'll have more legislative news, controversial issues, and profiles of interesting people. I'm Beth George. Good evening.
Welcome into the LPB studios one last time during this program. Joined by our very special guests, Jay Darden, Chef John Foes, Clay Fourier. I am Robin Merrick, and we're here talking Beth Courtney, fearless visionary. And you got one more time to give a call and pledge your support to LPB, 888-769-5000. And Clay, I'm going to start with you because we've got so much. You've done everything at LPB, literally. It feels that way. Ever since I've been around, you've been doing everything here. So I want to talk a bit about how LPB has, over these 46 years, you've come through this technological age and you've kept up with everything, and now LPB is doing some revolutionary work in that same vein.
Exactly. And I did want to mention that first and foremost, we will always broadcast, whether it be on cable or through a streaming service or directly over the air, whatever. If you've got a TV, if you've got an antenna or something like that, you can catch LPB. But we also know that so many of the people out there, so many of those folks, are going now to these digital services, and they're watching things on their mobile phone, they're watching things on their iPads and computers, which is why we have Passport, the PBS LPB online service where you can watch anything at any time. Yes, I'm a big fan of Passport all the time. So we have really embraced this. We have a digital production department now. We have done some great series like Nourish, like Good Gumbo, and Ziggy's Arts Adventures for kids. Fantastic. If you haven't gone there, if you haven't seen it, please do it right now. So we know that the future is in digital and in the multi-platforms that people watch programming on. So we will continue to broadcast, but we are moving forward because we know where the future of Louisiana's public and kids, where they lie, and we're going to be there.
That's right. So Clay, before we go any further, we want to remind everyone of the great thank you gifts that we have for this program, and also ways that you can support LPB with our new fund.
Exactly. We have what we're calling this Legacy for LPB Productions, because I wanted to mention to everyone out there that we do these productions on the culture, the history, on education, on the food, on the politics of Louisiana, only with your support. So if you call us at 888-769-5000, if you text GIVE to that number, if you go online to lpb.org and make a secure pledge, if you use that QR code that's going there, just like we have all the different platforms, we have all the different ways to pledge right now, we have some great thank you gifts so that you can help us create more great Louisiana productions. For example, for your pledge of $120 or just $10 a month, you'll receive the Roku Express, and with that you can watch your favorite LPB PBS programs whenever you want, wherever you want. Consider taking a leadership role with other statewide people by becoming a major donor. Join the Directors Club with a contribution of $500 or more. That will really help us towards producing more programming here on LPB. Or become a Visionary Society member with a contribution of $1,200. Now that breaks down to just a little more than $3 a day. In fact, you can become a Visionary Society member through your sustaining membership program at $100 a month. Or, for those who are able, consider leading the way with a contribution of $10,000 or more and becoming a Louisiana Legends Society member. Now, your investment will help sustain LPB as a public media resource available to all Louisiana citizens. And when you contribute at any level, you provide a foundation of support for new and established productions. That's productions like Attack-a-Paw that you're seeing right here, a great program with Zachary Reshore talking about the history of the Acadians. There's a Chapelaya Houseboat, wonderful program about living in the wild in Louisiana. Against the Tide, about the coast of Louisiana and where that's going, and deeply rooted about our heritage, our agricultural heritage. You know what, Robin, these are just a few examples of the body of work that folks out there can help with their contributions to LPB. So again, 888-769-5000, text GIVE to that, go online to lpb.org, make the pledge of support, use that QR code. We will continue to present more great programming here on LPB with those pledges. Robin?
And you know who supports programming here at LPB? That is Roy O. Martin. We thank him for that support because what he's doing right now in his company, they are matching dollar for dollar all of your contributions that are coming in during this break. We've got our corporate challenge, so that means up to $1,500. Your gift can be doubled to LPB. So if you're enjoying the programming, this means you can help us make it happen even more so by giving your pledge of support right now and knowing that it will be doubled by Roy O. Martin up to $1,500. So call us 888-769-5000. You can text, you can go online at lpb.org, or you can scan that QR code. We've got those 4 ways that you can give your support to LPB, and we're excited about that. So LPB is Louisiana's major storyteller. And we know that LPB is always telling the stories of our people and our places. And Commissioner Darden, you've got this amazing program that's coming up. And there are several people, quite a few folks that have heard about this and have seen it, but now we get to memorialize it in film.
It's going to be a lot of fun. Why Louisiana ain't Mississippi or any place else. It's really kind of an amalgamation of everything that's LPB. It's going to tell the story of Louisiana historically and culturally and demographically and the arts and the food and the sports, everything that makes Louisiana unique in the world, and it really is. And it's really just an extension of the kind of work we've done with Beth through the years. I can remember we did Louisiana 200 years as we celebrated our bicentennial. We did a Sunshine by the Stars show featuring Harry Connick Jr. Talking about the impact of You Are My Sunshine, which will be a big part of the presentation that's coming up. But it's going to be a lot of fun. Later this year, you can look for a 4-part series of Why Louisiana Ain't Mississippi or any place else.
That's right. You know, Louisiana, tucked where we are geographically, neighboring states, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, we're still very unique, even though we've got those close relationships. And we thank those viewers who are watching in those areas as well, because they enjoy public broadcasting.
And it's certainly not a put down on Mississippi. It's all about why Louisiana is unlike Missouri or Minnesota or Mississippi or anywhere else.
It's why we are who we are that makes us so unique. So yeah, we're looking forward to that story. And I've had a chance to hear it before, so I can't wait to see it in film. And Chef, you know, we've got your cooking show, but you know, LPB's got amazing cooking shows across the board, and you've had an opportunity to fit into that cadre of shows. But tell us more about the broadcasting in that vein.
Well, I think that we inspired so many other stations around the country as well, because Beth was such a leader in food television. Because when she, I mean, think about it, we've been on for what, 15, 18 years. So she was really a visionary in realizing that in culture, recreation, and tourism, that people were coming and recognizing New Orleans and Louisiana in general, all of Louisiana, as a culinary center that should be explored. And she gave us that opportunity to bring the people, the food, the uniqueness of all of our different parishes in Louisiana to the world. And I saw it immediately once our show started to air, our Taste of Louisiana started to air, that I started getting calls from all over the country saying, can you come and do a speech on this cooking, or can you come do a jambalaya festival for us? And I realized right away that through Louisiana Public Broadcasting, we were being called to the United States when people were looking at Louisiana cuisine as the new hot kid on the block, with Paul Prudhomme and these other guys who were working really hard to showcase our uniqueness in cooking. And Beth just jumped on that right away, and she was a fearless leader in making sure that if we wanted to do something to bring Louisiana cooking somewhere, LPB was going to do it. And that's what made John Falls John Falls.
You know, we like to say around here that, you know, we were the original Food Network. We say that.
Absolutely, we were the first Food Network. And she never said no to any of our craziness. Whatever we wanted to do, and I look at all of my 16 different series on LPB, every one of them showcased a different part of the uniqueness of Louisiana's cuisine and culture. And of course, this guy right here supported us to make it happen. And because of that partnership between our Lieutenant Governor's office at the time and Beth with her vision and giving us the ability, she never said no.
And she would never let the legislature say no. That was another
you know,
thing.
And that's
she had a level of credibility with the legislature.
Yeah, that's
because
an amazing
of
feat.
It really was.
Yeah.
What LPB was able to do, and her personal integrity and credibility, she was able to go to the legislature and get funds to do the kind of behind-the-scenes things that were necessary to make programs like John succeed.
That's right, and these things will last on and on. We've got an incredible legacy here at LPB, and this story that we've had a chance to watch has just been inspiring on a number of levels. I think everyone can take something from this show to really learn to be more fearless, learn to step out and follow a vision. I mean, there are so many takeaways from the program that we were watching, and it's amazing. So all the more reason to support a public broadcasting in Louisiana. 888-769-5000 is the number to call, and we're gonna say good evening. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Chef, Commissioner, Clay, our all-around guy, thank you so much. Folks, good night, and thank you for joining us.